Hi, I'm Lindsay, and this is Kinda Healthy Podcast. Today, my guest is Angie Collins-Burke. In 2013, Angie was a registered nurse with over 25 years' experience. But that same year, she also suffered a debilitating stroke that left her unable to walk, talk, or see. In her book, Just Pick Up the Peg, A Nurse's Journey Back from Stroke, she talks about her struggles through pain and despair to now being an elite status bodybuilder, motivational speaker, and stroke survivor mentor. Here's my conversation with Angie. Thank you for coming on today, Angie.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I was really inspired when I came across your story. You are a stroke survivor turned fitness enthusiast.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about what your life was like before the stroke happened.
So before the stroke happened, I worked as a registered nurse. I worked at the local hospital in the town where I live. I specialized in palliative care. I had been a registered nurse for 26 years. I've been married now for 30 years. And together we have 2 grown sons.
Nice. So the stroke happened in 2013, am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So you were a nurse. How did you feel about experiencing a stroke after having been a nurse?
It was kind of a double-edged sword. It was good because I knew what was happening and what the doctors were telling me and what the test meant, but it was bad because I knew what the doctors were telling me. So it kind of went both ways. It was helpful because when they spoke to me, I understood what they were saying, but I also knew what the implications were and what the possible outcome could be.
Right. So what was your experiences with pain?
I had, before the stroke actually happened, I had a horrible headache, which I thought and the hospital thought was a migraine. I had actually gone to the hospital and received treatment for the migraine, or what we thought was a migraine, and had just come home from the hospital. My husband had gone to let the dog out and he heard a crash and found me on the floor. And that was sort of my main experience with pain at the time. And I do have now, and I've had since the stroke on my affected side, what I call neuropathic or nerve pain. It feels like the entire left side of my body, more prominent in my affected hand and foot, are on fire.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, because I am looking at some information about you. You did mention the neuropathic pain. And when I read up on that, it was saying that that's also a side effect of some medications. So I was surprised that there are probably more people experiencing that, but not really knowing what it is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, because of my background in nursing and because I had specialized in palliative care, part of my role was assessing the different types of pain in the patients that we saw. So I actually went to my doctor who was looking after me at the time at the rehab hospital once I had gone through the ICU and the trauma center, et cetera, and said that I have neuropathic pain on my left side. And he kind of looked at me and eventually he put the pieces together and figured out that I had been a nurse and prescribed some medications to help make it tolerable. I do still have nerve pain flare-ups. Sometimes I'll have a flare-up, and when they happen, it affects me so badly that I start to limp, and at some points I have to lay down and just kind of let it quiet down. But for the most part now with the medication, it's bothersome, but it's not excruciating like it was in the beginning.
Right. And I think you mentioned that you kept a pain journal too to help track it and understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's really almost a good tip for anybody who's experiencing any kind of pain to kind of follow it, see when it's worse, when it feels better. Because a lot of times it seems like people just get used to having pain, but don't really try to understand it and see what, how they can improve it if they can.
And I wanted to try and get that message out 2 ways. I do have a YouTube channel where I talk about pain, and I do have a chapter in the book where I talk about pain, to make people aware that there are different types of pain. And I think that's important because different types of pain respond better to different treatments, and you can have more than one type of pain at the same time. So it's very important that you see a healthcare provider that is well versed in pain management, so they can diagnose what type of pain or what type of different pains that you are experiencing to get you on the right track for treatment.
Oh, okay. So that I would be interested in asking, what would your advice be if you feel like the doctor you are talking to uh, maybe isn't going to be able to help you with it? Is there a way to tell when you have a good doctor to help you with that pain, or when they don't seem to be skilled in that area?
I think a lot of it comes down to gut feeling and how they respond to you. And, are they asking the right questions about, describing your pain? Do they seem to be knowledgeable about, you can ask them questions, are you aware of the different types of pain, and see if they know, like, there's somatic pain, there's neuropathic pain, there's visceral pain. So are they well versed in that? And are they well versed in the various treatments? And how receptive are they to you, listening to you when you're talking to them about your pain? And if you do keep a pain journal, are they receptive to actually looking at that and listening to it and taking your pain seriously? And because a lot of times I think people who experience chronic pain are, because so many people unfortunately do abuse the system, they are kind of shunned as, oh yeah, they're just drug seeking, and they're not really listened, and they're not really heard. So you need to find a doctor that's really going to take the time to listen to you and hear what you're saying, and be willing to try different things, because just because they prescribe a treatment or they offer a treatment doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work the first time. Sometimes it has to be tweaked several times to find what works for you and for what types of pain that you are in fact experiencing.
Right. And I think that is good for people to know, that just because one solution doesn't work for you doesn't mean that you need to lose hope. You can still keep trying.
And that's part of what you need to include in your pain journal, is things that you have tried that have worked and things you've tried that haven't worked. And that includes treatments from your doctor, because then, the doctor may say, well, let's try this. And you can look back and say, no, I already tried that. It didn't work. Or if you do then decide to seek another opinion, or to seek somebody else, for example, instead of a doctor, maybe a physiotherapist or another person that may be able to help you, then they can look at that valuable information and look at things that you've already tried that haven't worked, and so you're not repeating things that don't work.
Right. So how do you feel like things were for you psychologically? What was your mind frame like after having the stroke and needing to recuperate?
Initially, I was extremely determined. I was going to beat this, and I was going to fight, and I worked very hard. But unfortunately, my mood began to slip as the reality of my situation set in, and I did find myself in the middle of a major depression, and it actually got so bad that I did have to be hospitalized for treatment. And depression is quite prevalent among stroke survivors, and a lot of other people in the community, but I did receive help, professional help, and that combined with a lot of support from friends and family, I was able to dig my way out and find that woman that had initially fought and been so determined and began to fight back again.
How long would you say that you went through a difficult period? If there is somebody that feels like they've been feeling a little hopeless for a while, maybe that it's not going to stay that way. So how long do you feel like you had a really difficult time before you were able to pull yourself out of it?
It was a long time, partially because of my fault. I won't say my fault, but partially because at the beginning, I didn't want to, I don't know if admit it was is the right word, but I thought I could beat it. I can fight this on my own. I don't need help. I can do this. I'm strong. I can do this. And I don't think I realized how bad it was getting.
Oh,
And then initially, because I do have epilepsy now, when I did seek help from my physician, the treatment that was suggested was an antidepressant. And as soon as he told me that there was a slim chance that it could lower my seizure threshold, and I'm absolutely terrified of having seizures again, I initially said, no, I'm not taking that. I'm sorry. So I refused treatment and I continued to slide. And that's why it got as bad as it did. So, I mean, I was well over a year from the start of when I started to slide until I started to feel like my old self again. And I mean, I still have my days, as we all do, and I still struggle with the depression. I don't know if it has actually ever gone away completely, but now instead of being in the forefront, it's just kind of in the background, and it comes forward every now and again.
right. So yeah, the epilepsy was an effect of the stroke, right?
That is correct.
Is that very common for after strokes?
I don't believe it is very common, but at the time I had my stroke, I did have a seizure. And then when I was in the hospital, I had a second seizure. So being a nurse, I knew that I think it's something like 8 times more likely to experience seizures later on. It was several months before I had more seizures, but then they were coming fairly regularly, and that's when they had to start tweaking medications to get them under control, and I realized that I now have epilepsy.
How do you feel like getting into fitness has helped you physically and mentally?
It has helped me tremendously both ways. It has helped me physically because it has helped me to improve and overcome many of the deficits that the stroke left me with. It has helped me to improve my endurance, and it has helped me to improve my strength. But it has also helped me mentally because when you exercise, endorphins are released, and that helps with depression. And it also helps now that I have built up the courage, and well, I have been going for 4 years now, to go to a gym, because it also allows me the ability to socialize, which is very important as well. So that helps my mental aspect as well. So it has helped me tremendously with both aspects, and also to see improvements in my body, because after a stroke, I'm sure I'm not the only one, you struggle with body image because you look different, but to see, some baby muscles starting to pop, and then that kind of drove me. As soon as I started to see that, I thought, oh, I really like this. I like the way it makes me feel. I like the way it makes me look. And that kind of fueled my desire to want to keep doing it.
What made you initially start with it? Was it just wanting to get stronger, or what really kicked off getting into fitness for you?
Initially, when I started, I wanted to try and improve some of the deficits that the stroke had left me with. I didn't actually start with weightlifting first. I had purchased a treadmill prior to my stroke, and I started working on that every day because I wanted to improve my gait, because when I started walking, I walked different. My gait was different. So I wanted to improve that, and I wanted to improve my endurance. And so that initially was the start of my fitness journey, was just on a treadmill. But once I got my endurance to a point where it was pretty good, and my gait was pretty good, I purchased just a cheap little weight set that you can get. I think it had a 1, a 3, and a 5 pound free weight. And I started working with that at home, and I just watched videos online. I had never really dedicated a lot of time to fitness before because I just didn't have time. And after I had worked away for a while, they got too light. So then I had to purchase 10 pounds, and then 15. And then at that point, I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. I had never even set foot in a gym before. And here I was at the time, 49 years old. I'd had a stroke. Okay, let's join a gym. So I did. And I joined a gym, and I just splurged, and I did a few sessions with a trainer. And the first session, he did a complete assessment. He assessed my strength, my weaknesses, my balance, my range of motion. And then he designed a program for me to start working on my strength.
So I know you also do a lot of motivational speaking and mentoring for
Mhm.
other stroke survivors. What made you jump into that arena?
Originally, it started with at the hospital where I had worked. The manager of the stroke unit obviously knew me, and the March of Dimes had approached her about a program called Pierce Fostering Hope. And it was where stroke survivors go into the hospital and they meet with other stroke survivors and just sit with them. And I thought I would have loved that so much when I was going through my journey. It's, yes, I was a nurse, but it's completely different reading it from a textbook and hearing it in a lecture than it is actually living it. And I thought I could be that person. You know, I would have loved to have been able to sit with the stroke survivor and ask them questions and just hear their perspective and what their journey was like. And I thought, I can do that for other people. I can. So I immediately was absolutely, plus it would get me back at the bedside working with people, which is where my passion was, and it still is helping people. So I jumped at the chance, and that's where it started.
And then from that, you started getting questions about why don't you write a book, right?
It sort of led to my journey. It's kind of funny. My journey since my stroke, when I started to do something, it's led me to something I could have never even dreamt of. The first time I stepped on the treadmill, I had no intentions of running a 5K. I just wanted to be able to walk better.
Right.
The first time I touched a weight, I had no intentions of becoming really obsessed with weightlifting and bodybuilding and following that path. The first time I sat down at my typewriter. Oh, now I'm dating myself. My computer. I was just journaling how I was feeling because I think that's really important to journal. And after I had typed for quite a while, a former coworker had mentioned that she had a friend who was an author that would be interested in working with me, and we paired up. And before we knew it, we had put together Just Pick Up the Peg.
So what would be some just general life motivating tips that you would want anybody to know?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned from my journey, my entire life, my entire adult life, I had always put so many other things ahead of myself. My kids, my job. I was at the bottom of the list. But after I had my stroke, for the first time in my life, I was forced to make myself a priority. I had no choice. And it was nice to be able to learn to do things for myself without feeling guilty that, you know what, those dishes are still going to be in the sink when I get home, but if I want to go to the gym and work out, I'm going to. And so I guess one of the biggest life lessons is don't put yourself at the bottom of the priority list. Do things for you.
That's great. Um, Another thing I was wondering about was, let me see here. Oh yeah, that was a thing. In the book, you invited other people to come tell their stories because you didn't want the book to just be about you. So, could you tell me a little bit more about coming to that conclusion?
So many times on stroke survivor groups, I belong to a lot of them, you know, stroke survivors would say, I wish people understood. I wish people understood. And I thought, I have an opportunity with this book to give them a voice, to finally give them a voice. So I went on some of these groups and I posted a question. If you could tell people one thing about stroke or stroke recovery, what would it be? And I received hundreds of responses. So I grouped them into different categories and, kind of pieced them together. And so the last chapter of the book, which is called The Final Word, is entirely written by stroke survivors. And it's letting them finally say to the world, this is the one thing that I feel is important enough that I want people to understand about stroke. And I thought it was a good opportunity as well for families of stroke survivors, caregivers, friends, and healthcare professionals to read, to give them a little bit of insight into what it's like to live as a stroke survivor through our eyes.
You're right. Yeah, because I don't think people hear enough about that. And giving other people an opportunity to have a voice to talk on that was a really great thing to do on your part, because I think more people should have a voice and a platform to speak on the things that are personal and important to them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I also included in it tip boxes, and also I have boxes where I highlight information or experiences that I had. And although every stroke journey is different, many of the things I experienced and what I'm talking about are the unseen challenges, the challenges that you can't look at a person and see.
Right.
So for example, loss of identity, because I went through an identity crisis. You know, I lost my job. I wasn't able to do many of the roles that I had done. I felt different about myself. And I think people need to be aware of that. You know, depression, as we already discussed, frustration, and not only stroke survivors live with that, but a lot of people we deal with frustration in our life. And sort of insight that I learned on dealing with that as I attempted to relearn many of the things that I used to be able to do. Something I call the what if syndrome. And how many times do we get caught in the what if? And when I broke it down, I really thought about what is this what if syndrome and what to do when you find yourself getting caught up in that.
So what do you do?
So when you think about the what if syndrome, you're doing one of two things. What if I hadn't had a stroke? What am I doing? I'm dwelling on the past. What if I have another stroke? What if I have another, what am I doing? I'm worrying about the future. So let me ask you something. When has dwelling on the past ever done anything positive? Nothing. It's already happened. I can what if all day long, but I still will have had the stroke. And when has worrying about the future ever stopped something bad from happening?
Right.
Never. It's wasted energy. And I guess what I learned from that when I really sat down about it is we need to focus on right here, right now, because this moment in time that we have right here, right now it's really all we've got. So what I had to learn to do was to catch myself when I was doing the what if, and bring my focus back to right here, right now. And what do I need to be doing right here, right now in this moment?
The other day, I read a post of yours on Instagram where you were describing the coffee cup, about talking about what you're filling yourself with and what spills out. So when you have the cup of coffee and somebody bumps you and you spill some coffee, and then it's like, well, why did that happen? Right? And so you go, well, I spilled the coffee because somebody bumped me. But the answer really is what you fill yourself up with is what's going to come out when you face difficulties. So if it was tea, then tea would have spilled out. If, you're full of, gratitude and humility, those are going to spill out when you hit a difficult patch. But if you're full of anger and bitterness, that's what's going to come out. So it's really important to focus on your attitude, and how you handle things will be affected by that, right?
And that is something I learned on my journey. I went through periods where I was extremely angry, and I was full of anger, and I was full of, why me, why me, why me? And I went through many, many pity parties. And so I'm not saying that my journey was perfect. I went through all of that, and I still have days where, why did this happen to me? But yeah, I try to focus on things that I'm thankful for, and mindset. Mindset is so important.
Right. Yeah, because having a story like yours to put difficulties into perspective, because people can be like, why me, over very small things. It's easy to lose perspective on what's important and what's not. So that's why I was so excited to talk to you, because you did go through an unexpected life-changing event. And like you said, you were in a good place about it initially until you realized how difficult it was going to be and how many challenges you really needed to overcome. And, how hard that was to realize, but still, you can pull yourself out of that and get to a place that's probably even better than where you started.
And that's, I think, sort of why I wanted to tell my story with Just Pick Up the Peg as well, to let not just stroke survivors know, but to let people know who are living. I mean, we all have challenges in life or living with chronic illnesses that, you know, it's not going to be all sunshine and roses, but it is possible to overcome. And yes, my old life is gone and I will never get that old life back again, but it's okay. You can build a new life, and that new life can be fulfilling. And although different, it can be rewarding, and it can be okay. It can be okay.
Right. What is your YouTube channel called?
Actually, I have a website or a web page. So it's angiecollinsburke.com. So if you go there, there's links to the various videos that I do. And most of the videos I do are, again, talking about some of the unseen challenges that we face from my perspective, and again, some of the insight that I've learned, because I think that's very, very important. And also there is my co-author and I now are on the blog roster for psychologytoday.com. So there's also links there to the various blogs that have been posted.
Yeah, what you said about kind of like getting over the life you could have had. I know I've had some difficult times where I could have been like, well, it's not supposed to be this way. This wasn't supposed to happen. But I too try to kind of turn it into, well, it's a life experience at the least, something you can learn from and something you can move on from. And sometimes having those difficult times does help you just learn how to not be so rigid, and learn that sometimes you just need to be free to go with the flow.
And that was an important lesson I learned. I was very much a control freak prior. I think I kind of had to be. My life was so busy, but, you know, I'm going to take this course, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that. And because of the way I just described before, things have kind of evolved. I've learned that we don't maybe necessarily know why we're doing something at the time, but just I've learned to kind of just go with it, and you might be really surprised where your destination ends up.
Right. I know. I grew up with a family that was very much, if you just do it the right way, then everything will be all right. And as long as you figure out plan A, B, and C beforehand, you won't have anything to worry about. But that was never really my experience. But I mean, I was always kind of more of a go with the flow type of person. I know there are some things I don't know. I'll figure it out along the way, type of attitude. But I do feel like having that perspective is a lot more bearable than having the more strict, as long as you don't make any mistakes, everything will be all right, because there's no way to guarantee that nothing bad is ever going to happen.
Because it's reality of life. Life is going to throw you curveballs. It's just the way it is.
Right.
And, we have to learn how to respond to those. And that's part of the lessons that we learn as we go through life.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of the whole, being rigid is more like being stone, and that can crack and break. But if you're a more free flowing type of entity, you can go around the curves and, bend to what you need to. So I think that's a really positive thing to put out there, that, you just have to be open to things and allow yourself to be open to things, and everything will work out. Maybe not how you pictured it, but everything will be just fine.
Yeah.
And sometimes things do take a little bit more work than we're expecting, and that's okay too.
One thing I read, which I have found really interesting lately, is when something bad happens or you perceive as bad, try and think of it as, this is good because, and maybe try and think of, what is something positive that could possibly come from this? And sometimes you have to dig really deep to
Right.
find it. But again, it's trying to change that mindset to have a little bit more open-minded and I guess positive mindset. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, and I'm not saying I don't have days where I slip, but to try and in that moment, instead of sinking to the negative, which I unfortunately before my stroke, I tended to be an extremely negative person, to try and turn it around and think, okay, maybe something good can come of this. And again, and as you say, not right away, but maybe somewhere down the line, something good can come of that. I mean, the day of my stroke, if you would have said something good can come of this, and like what possibly can come good
Right.
of having a stroke. But now I'm almost 7 years out. A lot of good has come from this. A lot of bad happened to me, and I lost a lot of things, but there are things that I'm grateful for, and some positive things. I mean, being a stroke mentor, and the book, and helping people, and being an advocate for stroke survivors. And so some good has come from this.
So on the days that you are having a difficult time, what do you tell yourself to help kind of get yourself over that hump and back to where you want to be?
A lot of it is to try and change your mindset, or to push those thoughts out of your head. And I like meditating. Some people think it's crazy, but for me, meditating has helped very, very much, because it quiets the brain, and it teaches you to kind of take control of your thoughts, because many, many times we let our thoughts control us. And we need to learn we need to learn to recognize when those thoughts are starting to become negative, and to take back control, and maybe do something to divert ourselves away from that. Listen to some music that you like, read a book, go, if you're able, sit outside and just listen to the birds sing, just something to break that negativity, just something to break the chain of those thoughts.
Right. Yeah, because you don't have to allow yourself to suffer through it. I think that is nice that you said that you can just ignore it too, or just find a distraction to just get away from it, because sometimes we can just, nag ourselves. And if we did that to anybody else, it would be obvious that's not the right thing to do. But when we do it silently in our own heads, we have to protect ourselves from ourselves.
Well, and that's it. How many times do we get caught up in kind of made up scenarios that I bet you she's thinking this and she's saying that, and that's not even the case. And here you are stewing over something that's not even happening. Or one of the things I talk about in the book, and I did a video about, is how do you talk to yourself? And I found that was one of the bad habits I got into after I had my stroke, and I was struggling physically. I was struggling cognitively. I would call myself stupid. I would call myself an idiot, and I would call myself useless. And I mean, I would never dream of saying that to another human being. I would never say that. So why was it okay that I was saying it to me? Because if you say it to yourself enough, you're going to start to believe it. And again, to catch myself when I got into that pattern, and just, no, stop it. You're not an idiot. You have a brain injury.
Right. Yeah, it is important to treat yourself just as well as you would treat somebody else, especially if other people are in earshot.
And it was horrible. My family were devastated because they were around me when I was doing this, and it was very, very upsetting. And it got to the point where it was such a bad habit, I didn't even realize that I was doing it. I would struggle, boom, put myself down. It was just almost became a reflex action. I had done it so many times.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is an important thing to keep in mind, how you will build a habit out of it, and you'll do it even when you're not even thinking about it. So yeah, people who are struggling like that aren't lucky enough to have somebody close to them to say, you need to stop that. I think it is really good that people find a support group and people they can talk to and get their frustrations out with, because it's really scary to think of being alone by yourself, having to deal with that and work that out, and maybe not seeing the bad habits you're developing.
Two things that I found that helped me along with the support was journaling, if you're able to, because unfortunately not everybody has that support, and not everybody has somebody they can turn to. Just sitting down and even just writing down your thoughts and getting them out. But when I got into that habit of calling myself these names, I kind of looked up what I could do, and I found a really simple exercise, I guess we'll call it, on behavior modification. So all I did was I got an elastic, and not a really tight one, and put it around my band. And this may sound really silly, but it worked for me. And whenever I would call myself a name, I would give it a little snap, and it would kind of act as negative reinforcement. But the interesting thing is I only had to do it a few times. And then, I went to struggle one time, and I went to say it, and the time it took me to look down at the elastic was enough time for me to realize what I was going to do and stop myself. And I never had to snap it again. And I wore it for, a couple weeks just to make sure. But just having that split second to look down at the elastic was enough time for me to realize, wait a minute, you're not stupid. Don't don't do that. Stop it. And it helped break the habit.
Right. Yeah, that is good to build that self-awareness, even if it is by snapping yourself with a rubber band like that. I think that is great, because people could take that and use it in whatever way would be helpful to them. Anytime they're just self-doubting, or maybe thinking about saying something negative about somebody else. Maybe that's a habit you need to break. So is there anything else you'd like to add, Angie?
I just want to maybe talk a little bit about my experience living with an invisible disability, because I do have a brain injury. But when I go out in public, I look perfectly fine. And I'm not the only person that is experiencing this. I mean, there's people that are dealing with depression. You may have somebody that's dealing with a learning disability, dealing with other mental illnesses and so many other things. So just because a person looks perfectly fine on the outside does not necessarily mean they're perfectly fine on the inside. And I mean, I struggle when I go out sometimes, say to get groceries, for example. It takes me longer to find what I'm looking for. I get overwhelmed easily. I've had people roll their eyes at me. I've had people push me out of the way. So I think as a society, we need to be a little kinder to one another, because that person that's in front of you in line or whatever, you don't know what they're dealing with. They may be hanging on by a thread, and if you make a rude comment to them or something, that could be the final straw that kind of breaks that thread. So I think we just need to be a little kinder and a little less judgmental of each other, because you don't know what that person's dealing with. And they look fine. That does not mean they're fine.
Right. I think that's a great note to end it on, about being more compassionate to each other, knowing that we don't know everything that other people are going through, and to treat each other with a little bit more kindness and patience.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Angie. I think it was great. You had a ton of just really helpful life advice and tips, and a great attitude to share with everybody. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. It was truly an honor. I appreciate it.
Make sure to check out Just Pick Up the Peg. It's a great book for anyone who needs some encouragement for whatever life struggles you may face. You can find her book and all of her links at her website, angiecollinsburke.com, and I'll also have the website in the description for this episode. Thanks for listening.